then
Sure, you can ask if you want. Go ahead and ask. I'll tell you if it's going to take too long. Maybe we'll leave it right now.
so I know a lot of people interpret it as when his Lord, meaning Allah, but in my hypothesis is that it means whoever, if you know yourself, you know the desires that you're following that pull you,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
So,
So because the Quran even says a lot of us are um like polytheists, right? Because we have other
right.
gods with a small g, right? So that's how I interpret that line. But I don't want to take us off course. So
So, maybe there are different points that we can take out of this hadith. The words of the Ahlul Bayt are full of light. They can be understood in different ways. But one of them that the author of this book focuses on is what I was just saying, that there are a lot of kind of characteristics that the immaterial world can teach us. Our soul, if we ponder upon our soul, we realize there are kind of aspects to our immaterial soul that we don't see in the physical world. And that will help us to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Okay, inshallah. So the first lesson that we have is going to focus. I'd sent some notes if you guys got the email. We're going to start off with the idea of ghaib and shahada. These are Islamic concepts. Okay, there's a verse of Quran here in front of us. Wallahu alladhi la ilaha illa huwa alimul ghaibi was shahada. This is from Surah Al-Hashr. These are very Islamic concepts. They come up again and again in the Quran. They are going to somehow help us with this discussion of understanding that there are immaterial realms, worlds, realms beyond the physical dunya that we live in. Okay? So let's translate these terms. Ghaib simply means hidden. Shahada means apparent, witnessed. Okay, here it's translated as concealed versus witnessed. So let me translate the next two terms and then I'll make some comments on them. So ghaib is just generally something that is hidden, but then we talk about a world that is hidden, or worlds, plural maybe, plural worlds that are concealed and hidden, as opposed to the worlds that are apparent and known. Okay. One of the kind of consequences of these terms that should somehow, inshallah, become clear is that when we use the world, when we say alamul ghaib, alamul shahada, Islamic scholars, philosophers, when they do that, they're talking about a clear kind of group of worlds. It's no longer a relative term. Okay, whereas when we just say ghaib and shahada, that is relative, sorry. Let me explain a little bit further. What is hidden for one person might be apparent for somebody else. All of us know realities about our own soul that nobody else knows, right? And so, in that sense, those realities are shahada for us. They are apparent for us, but they are hidden to everybody else. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing is hidden. The whole of the universe, all of creation is there in front of Him, and it is all shahada for Him. Okay? So those concepts of ghaib and shahada are relative. But when we say the world of ghaib, alamul ghaib, alamul shahada, here we mean something that normal human beings have access to, a certain realm, the physical, material realm. Things that we can see, things that we can hear. Those things are all in the dunya, in the alam shahada. They don't need a complicated kind of proof to prove it for us. We see it right in front of us. It's obvious, right? As opposed to that, Islam is telling us the way that this iceberg is somehow you can see largely underwater. Islam is telling us that no, there are many, many realities that you cannot normally see. Normal human beings, before you die, you don't have access to these realities. After you die, slowly you will open your eyes to these other worlds, and some of those realities will become apparent to you. Okay. So this is the idea of alamul ghayb wa shahada.
Sheikh,
Mm,
is it
yeah.
fair to translate this concept of world as being existence or like creation, or is world as like the term Earth or world, is that like, is it more like a physical um, proximity? Is it well defined, or is it just all of creation, all of concealed creation, and all of unconcealed creation?
I think what existence is a very, very general term. Anything that God created, anything that is there, even God Himself, is existence or has existence. Anything that is, right? Then when you group certain existences together, you can call them a world, a realm, alam. So that's the general idea. Yeah. I don't know. Does that answer the question, kind of?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you.
So this is something that, we don't need a reminder about. Islam is constantly telling us, the Quran, Ahadith are telling us that there are all of these realities that are hidden from our eyes. Okay, take a look at this really nice hadith. Imam Baqir alayhi salam says the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's quoting the Prophet, that I used to look at camels and sheep when I was herding them, and all prophets were shepherds. There's a wisdom there that being a shepherd somehow gave them that patience and practice in shepherding human beings. So, to summarize, he would sometimes see that these animals all of a sudden get very disturbed and they would be startled. And then Angel Jibra'il later told him that this is because of the punishment that when a disbeliever is somehow punished, okay? Everybody, there is like a cry that goes out. Only human beings and jinn don't hear that. It's ghaib for the human beings and the jinn, but for even the animals, they can somehow hear that and recognize that. Okay, the next thing that's important to realize as part of this Islamic paradigm, just like previous classes, brothers and sisters, I'm going to take a break shortly, okay? In a few minutes, I'm going to say my Fajr prayers and come back. It's just become Fajr time over here in Qom. But yeah, one of the important things to remember in Islam is that the physical world that we see, there are layers behind these same realities that are connected to the immaterial worlds. That, like I said, after death, a lot of these realities will begin to become apparent to us. And so, in one sense, it's kind of useful to remember that when we say ghaib, things that are hidden, we can generally group them into two different things. One is just immaterial reality. Maybe it's not something we're in touch with. Okay, it's not something that's connected to directly, I don't know, a inner dimension of the physical world. But then other things in the ghaib, no, they are. They are the manifestation, the reality of actions and things in the physical world. And there are amazing stories of like spiritual unveiling that mystics have had, where they saw the inner reality of actions or people or different things. Yeah, haram, something that's haram might look very beautiful and attractive, but the reality at times in the Quran or in a hadith, they are explained to us. Backbiting is like biting the flesh of your brother, or taking money from an orphan is like putting fire in your belly. At times, spiritual like personalities, mystics have had spiritual unveiling where they saw the reality that haram food looked like blood to them. There's a story in the notes that I sent like that. So this is just it's just a kind of general grouping that some of the ghaib that we call ghaib, we mean that it is very much connected with something that we are in touch with. We just don't see the inner dimension of it. Okay. Okay, that was one point. The overall, like this is now the connection back to epistemology that okay, if I recognize that there's ghaib, what does that mean for me? How does that help me? How do I, use that knowledge? The idea is that even for the majority of people who, my apologies, everybody, I'm back, alhamdulillah. I really apologize. Some technical issue happened that shouldn't have happened. Okay. I hope everybody can hear me fine. Inshallah. I hope it doesn't happen again. Okay, I'm going to continue for a few more minutes and then I apologize. It's also prayer time here. I'll just take a few minutes break to pray namaz and quickly come back. I'll finish the point that I was making though and pause to see if anybody has any comments or questions. One second. Yeah, so the point that I was making was that, okay, once we believe in alam ghaib, one of the things that is related to epistemology is that we can use our intellect to find out about alam ghaib, to prove alam ghaib. That's what we're going to be doing in this class. We're going to be talking about the nafs, the human soul, and how it's immaterial, and giving intellectual proofs. And we talked about this idea that I can prove something and I can find out aspects of reality. This is somehow important to recognize that we don't believe in pluralism in some of these things. No, we believe that there is a truth here, that we can objectively come to a conclusion that my soul is immaterial and using my intellect, I can understand it. And another way, which is also related to the intellect, is to listen to the awliya of Allah, listen to the prophets, listen to the ahadith, the Quran. Of course, later on in Islamic beliefs, we have to somehow prove the authenticity of the Quran and the ahadith. But, assuming that we've already done that, we're all Muslims here, we can also somehow benefit from their explanation of reality. And so when they tell us things about the soul, when they tell us about the ghaib, they have access to the ghaib and they have seen the Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them, they have all the other worlds, barzakh, qiyamah, they've somehow seen it and they are familiar with it and they can tell us what happens. Some of the ahadith are very, very outstanding and, the realities that our intellect would never be able to tell us are there in ahadith. There's like, for example, a really scary, really amazing, lengthy hadith in Nahj al-Balagha about death and what happens at the time of death. When somebody's dying, what do they see happening around them? These are realities that the Ahlul Bayt somehow know that we can benefit from. Okay, I'm gonna put
Sh-
up, if there's any comments or questions, please do feel free to ask.
Yeah, later on, Sheikh, if you get a chance to share that details of that hadith in Legend Balaga, just to
Sure,
get that go
inshallah,
in detail.
definitely. Okay. So give me a few minutes, brothers and sisters. I know we just had to take a break because of my technical difficulties, but once again, I'm gonna take a 5 minute, less than 10 minute break for sure. I'm gonna go pray and come back. In the meantime, something that will help us kind of appreciate these concepts, I want you guys to think about a little bit is the idea of, human senses. Certain things we don't sense, but maybe a dog, another animal can sense. So now think about that. Would we call that ghaib? What do you think? That's one thing. And then this whole idea that Islam is giving us, this image that Islam is giving us of other worlds that are hidden. I want you guys to compare that to virtual reality. Compare that maybe to some certain science fiction movies you might have seen. And then again, share your comments with me when I come back. That do you think that that is a good example of what Islam is teaching us or not? Okay, I'll leave you guys to discuss these things, think about them, and I will come back in a few minutes, inshallah.
I think just to start things off, the reading also made a mention of the inability of humans to hear beyond the frequency ranges of our hearing, but animals can. So similar to we can see visible wavelengths, but not infrared or ultraviolet and beyond. Kind of to take that into the other extreme, you often hear the khatibs talking about, oh, how jinns might be hidden in those wavelengths, which irks me a little bit. Wanting to hear what other people have to say about this.
Mhm. I think you've seen here in the West, we use dogs in the airport because they can smell uh, what a passenger may be carrying, right?
I guess to me the question becomes like if the animal can sense something that we cannot possibly detect with any tools, even kind of some measure, some chemical, something, then I would personally call it ghaib, that's inaccessible to us with any means possible. Um, but if it's, for example, infrared wavelengths where something might be able to see it, but I have the means to understand that it's there, then I wouldn't call it ghaib.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. There's examples of animals that can smell even when someone is sick, like they're using dogs that maybe can smell or somehow sense if someone had COVID. There was examples of uh, birds that can use magnetic wavelengths or fish to find, like, echolocate or somehow find where they came from, GPS somehow technology. Um, we don't understand it probably fully, but somehow it seems that everything that we have um, uh, discovered or unearthed about how animals seem to sense, we can probably also figure it out using some other mechanism or sensors to be able to do that. So I'm with you as well, that I think the Reib is beyond that. It's beyond what we can use anything man-made or even animals to sense.
Hmm.
Then in that case, virtual reality pretty much would be more of a shahada than ghaib, because this is something that we can kind of experience. It's not something that's completely vague, that's completely out of this world where we can't even touch, smell, or hear it, or even feel it. I think that would also put that into in my opinion, I think more of a shahada category rather than it being more of a ghaib sort of thing.
Mm.
I was actually thinking on the contrary. I was thinking that a virtual reality world is something that's inaccessible to us until we get that special goggles, let's log into that special system, without which it would be completely inaccessible. And the fact that it is generally inaccessible to us without a very special means makes it kind of a ghaib.
Is it that idea of comprehension? Can we even understand Gabe? I think that's probably what it comes down to. That virtual reality, somehow someone must have dreamt it up or imagined it. So there's an imagination concept, but I think Gabe is also, it can be understood even if not sensed. So I also tend to agree with you that um, that virtuality um, could be ghaib.
But then again, like you could take another spin on that, is that whatever we're told about the ghaib is something that is still projected onto the world that we understand. Like, for example, the concept of hoods would be something that we would be able to understand, but not necessarily the same thing that we would conceive to be hoods here, for example, or like the rivers of honey and milk is something that we can comprehend as an analogy, but does not necessarily mean that it is like that.
Assalamu alaikum.
Uh,
I'm back. I just started hearing Brother Zain, you were talking?
We were discussing the second point,
Mhm.
and there was a very interesting discussion. The
Okay.
question on it being ghaib or not. There was an argument that the fact that a virtual reality is still imagined by humans, that makes it shahada, not ghaib, because it's something that's still within our perception. There's an
Mhm.
argument that because it's not generally accessible to us, and we need a portal to get to that world, makes it ghaib as well. And then
Mhm.
there's a discussion that, what about like the ghaib that we talk about? Because that thing can also be imagined. Like we have explanations and descriptions of the ghaib. Would that put it under the purview of, something that can be conceived? So it's that would mean that if something can be conceived, that means does not necessarily mean that it's not ghaib. So in this case, if virtual reality can be conceived, then uh, that does not mean that it's not ghaib.
Sounds interesting. Because it can't, just because it can be conceived, it doesn't mean that it's not ghaib. That's what you're saying? Because
Yes.
it can be, the idea is that it can't normally be conceived. Yeah, these are good points. Good points. Let me just also look at the chat. Sister Sukaina has said some people can be directionally challenged, but animals can have like amazing ability here. Hasn't. Santi. Yeah, overall, guys, there wasn't a very clear correct or wrong answer for these. I just wanted us to think about them more. I think that, we can also these words ghaib and shahada can somehow be maybe used in a certain way which can be revised at times. So I think generally in Islam, when we use these words, we are talking about the celestial realms, alam malakut, and the higher realities that God has created that actually exist, but we are not able to see them. We're not talking normally about like the frequency of sound that human beings cannot hear, but a dog can hear. But in a very, if we want to just say ghaib is what is hidden, then we can maybe that frequency of sound or yeah. So that for the first question, I think it kind of goes back to how we're using the term. But normally, maybe Muslims are not using it in that sense. The virtual reality world is in something interesting to think about. I don't know exactly what to say here, but I was looking at it from this perspective that the idea of virtual reality is very similar to what Islam is telling us. That imagine for a moment somebody has 3D goggles on their face, and they've grown up with these 3D goggles their whole life. They have just considered themselves to be that virtual reality character. This was the example that is there in the book that I was going for with my question, actually. That idea, and then one day we have like a ceremony and we take the goggles off that individual and they look around and they see the real world and they realize that, oh my God, my whole life I've been living in that virtual reality world, which was so tiny and insignificant and limited compared to this new world that now I'm in. And that is an example of what Islam is telling us will happen to us when we die. That we will realize that all this time there was this other world that we were heedless of, and we somehow now open our eyes to that new world. And initially it's uncomfortable, but eventually we get used to it. And for a believer, at least, it's much, much more pleasurable, beautiful, enjoyable than the world they were in before. But yeah, in terms of whether a virtual reality game would be called ghaib or not, I guess that generally the idea behind virtual reality is that everybody can access it, right? Like I don't know, you can just put on those goggles or install that software and access it. So whatever it is somehow shahada. I don't know. These are things we can think about. It's not necessarily very clearly right or wrong. If anybody wants to make any more comments, though, please do feel free to go ahead. Otherwise, I will continue, inshallah. Any last comments? Questions, comments? Okay. The next discussion that inshallah we'll go into, and this is now kind of going, like I said, into Islamic cosmology, the idea of not just ghaib, but clarifying some of the different worlds that Islam teaches us, that the Quran teaches us exist. And inshallah, we'll kind of end with that today. Maybe I'll give you guys a story. Next week, either we will go into a little bit more detail or we'll just start the main discussion of the course, which is about the immaterial soul. Okay. So in terms of realms of existence, if we look at the Quran carefully, a lot of verses of the Quran somehow show these realities to us. But philosophers and mystics have somehow, really kind of clarified it more. And they've explained things in different ways at times. And not everything, even the philosophers and mystics have huge debates and discussions and differences of opinion. But one of the kind of explanations is what you can see in these images over here. That there are, broadly speaking, three worlds. There is the lower world, which is called the dunya. That's the world that we live in. If you give me a moment, I'll even give you some other kind of philosophical terminology for every one of these worlds. Um, Nasut, I think. Okay, the dunya, the lowest level is called the Nasut. Yeah. Okay, the world, the material world. And then above it, you have a world. So I'll explain the picture, the pyramid and the sphere shortly. But there's this idea that the physical world is the lowest. Dunya, dunya means that. Dunya has this meaning of like low and wretched and close. Okay, because it's the closest, easiest for us to access. We're living in this dunya kind of, right? We're heedless of the other worlds that do exist right now. Then above this world, there is another world, which is a world of immaterial. So beyond the dunya, all the worlds now are immaterial in the sense that they're not in the physical world. You can't, get into a rocket ship or a plane and travel there. If you go east or west or up or down, you're never going to reach there. But the world above us, even though it's immaterial in that sense, it still has shapes and forms. Okay, that's called alam mithal or barzakh or malakut. Islamic terminology would be malakut for it. A lot of the realities that I talked about, like I don't know, sin being shown as fire or blood or things like that, that's the manifestation of the sin in the alam malakut. And these are realities that are there right now. It's just that we are heedless of them. Okay. Brother Masood, I think khalq would be everything other than God would be khalq. So it would encompass all of these worlds. Okay? So the one above us is the
Yes.
malakut. Yeah, did you have a question for the Masood? No? Somebody was saying something. If anybody. No?
Yeah, Sheikh, sorry. I was asking that the three alams that you mentioned, alam al-malakut, alam misal, and barzakh, they're all synonymous, right? The terms for the
Yeah, yeah.
same.
They're used. Yes, yes. Synonymous. Okay.
Okay,
So
got it. Okay, perfect.
first was
Thanks.
the dunya. First world was the dunya, or also nasut. The next one is mithal, also known as malakut or barzakh. And then above that is the alam aql, or Jabarut. Here in this image, it says Aql. The idea there is it's totally, totally immaterial realities, realities that exist. They are true beings, creation, but there's no longer any form or shape. We will, when we talk about our soul, we'll say that even we exist at that level. The fact that we can somehow understand concepts and knowledge that is totally immaterial means that we are also a being that exists at that level. And then beyond that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which they even refer to as Lahut. So these in like mysticism or philosophy, they have these terms: Lahut, Jabarut, Malakut, and Nasut. When we draw Allah in these kind of images, it shouldn't, of course, lead us to a kind of shirk that, oh, God is in a certain place. No, what we mean is that the perfection is more and more as you go up that pyramid on the in the top picture that you can see in the slide, and the total perfection source of everything, which is unlimited. Okay, so to draw it as a circle is wrong. It's unlimited perfection is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then God's creation, He somehow has created worlds that there is this gradation of existence, where existence is somehow becoming less and less and less, and there is all these realms that are somehow lower and further away from Him. Because these are concepts that are there in the Quran, that God is at the top and everything He creates is somehow descending down. Again and again in the Quran, we see this idea of inzal and tanzil, that whatever God created, He sends it down. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم وأنزلنا الحديد. These are all verses of the Quran where God uses this imagery of sending things down that He created. On the other hand, going back to God is an ascent. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un is this idea. Okay, that maybe doesn't have the idea of going up, but other verses, إليه يصعد الكلم الطيب, or God is described as being high up, Ali, Ali, the idea of being high. This is imagery that's there in the Quran, in Islamic tradition, and it somehow can be explained in a nice way with this explanation that I'm giving, that it's not a physical being that we're talking about. These are immaterial realities, but in that their perfection is more, there is this idea that they are higher up. Okay. And so it can be drawn like the pyramid. It can also be drawn like the sphere, because there's this idea that the causes and the descent and the lower worlds are encompassed by the higher worlds. Again, these are things that later on we'll try to talk about more and explain more. But there's a relationship here that we don't see such relationships in the physical world. So it's hard for us to kind of understand this. But there's a relationship where the immaterial causes, going back to God, they encompass and they are there with the lower effects. The effect is totally kind of encompassed. And a good example is like your thought, a thought that you have in your mind. What's the relationship between that thought and you? You are totally with it. You are greater than it, not like you are in charge of it, but it's totally somehow encompassed by who you are. And so this idea of an immaterial relationship of being encompassing is a good example is thoughts in our mind. And that's what we're seeing over here, that there are these realms of creation that God has created, and each lower realm is somehow the effect and encompassed by its cause in the higher realm. The things descend down and again ascend back up. Again, I can give a few more verses of the Quran to show how these are not things that philosophers and mystics are imposing on Islam. Rather, their claim is that they are the people who are properly explaining the Quran. Other people who have not understood these concepts they have somehow forced the Quran in a wrong way, or they've just not been able to explain the Quran. But it's these mystics and philosophers who have this kind of understanding who have somehow truly explained the Quran. I'll just quote a few more verses. For example, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un is a very important verse. It somehow indicates that all of God's creation, including us, we somehow descended from these higher realms, and as we die, we will return back to God. We will again go up to these higher realms of barzakh and aql and back to God, basically. ولله غيب السماوات والأرض وإليه يرجع الأمر كله. This is in Surah Hud, the 11th surah of the Quran, verse number 123. It says that for God is the hidden, the ghaib of the heavens and the earth, and everything returns back to Him. Okay? So again, these kind of concepts, or the idea of proximity to God. This is one of the fundamental Islamic concepts that we do whatever we do, qurbatan ilallah. And there are some people who are very close to God. In the Quran, some people are described as muqarrabun, very close to God. Other people are described as being far away from God. Ulaika yunadawna min makanin ba'id. That some people, God is calling to them from far away. How does that work? It's this idea that some people's soul they've gone on this purification, this journey, the highest level being the Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them, where there's no veil between them and Allah. They are the highest level in this kind of illustration that we've drawn. The soul of the Ahlul Bayt would be collected to the highest level just before God. And so that's the idea of proximity to God. It's like a journey. Islam is telling us to embark on this journey of going towards God. A lot of these Islamic concepts fall into place very nicely with this understanding. Okay, I'll end with a story unless anybody has any questions or comments. I have a nice story about the alam barzakh to just kind of drive home this point that these are realities that exist right now and they're just hidden from us. Yeah, Sister Zahra, the diagram is basically the pyramid says that Allah is the top of the pyramid, and then Alam Aqal is the next level, Alam Mithal under it, and then the point of the pyramid is Alam Dunya. Again, we shouldn't go towards, like it's not trying to say God is a physical being that we're somehow limiting him. No, of course not. It's just trying to give us this idea of perfection and existence becoming greater and greater as we go to the other worlds. And then the most greatest of all is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the pyramid. The sphere example is the same, that the outer sphere is Allah, and then within that there is the alam aqal. Within that there is alam mithal. Within that is alam dunya. Okay. Sister Shiza, do you have a question?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. I have a question that when a person returns back to Allah, do they pass through each of these stages?
Yeah, that's the idea that Barzakh is a stage and then Qiyamah is another stage. Now, the details here, does Qiyamah fall under in this division? Is it an example of Alam Aql? I think there's a lot of differences of opinion here. A lot of people would say that no, even Qiyamah and Jannat and Jahannam, we have bodies, we have very clear descriptions of what it looks like in the Quran and Hadith. So in this division, we can't say it's completely alam aql and it doesn't have any shape and form. But philosophers and mystics, they differ on this. But generally, there's no doubt about this idea of going to other worlds, that Barzakh is one world, and then we'll leave Barzakh and go to Qiyamah, which is another world. Okay?
Thank you.
No problem. I know we've come to an end of our time, but since we took some breaks, I'm just going to go a few minutes over. If anybody needs to leave, don't worry. I'm going to end with a really nice story. One of the great teachers of akhlaq, mujtahids, mystics, pious individuals who lived a long time ago was somebody by the name of Naraqi, Muhammad Mahdi Naraqi. He's the author of a famous book in akhlaq called Jami' al-Sa'adat. There's a really, really famous story from him. Okay, the story is very authentic. His grandchildren narrated it, and in the Hawza of Najaf, it was where he lived. It was a very, very well-known story. The story goes like this, that one day in the month of Ramadan, Naraqi he went home and his wife, his family told him, we don't have any food. Okay, please do something. Go get us some food. We want to have iftar. Help us out. Go get something. So he leaves his home in the month of Ramadan. It's evening, close to sunset. He goes to the graveyard, Wadi as-Salam. In Wadi as-Salam, there are some Arabs who are burying a dead person. And they see him, a sheikh, and they're like, okay, sheikh, come and finish this burial for us. We have to go. So they had dug the grave, they had begun to put the body in the grave, and then Naraqi comes and takes over. And he does the mustahabbat, he puts the clay, the soil under the head, and he makes the body face the qibla. And then this is because of his piety, because of his purity, he somehow is able to enter the alam-e barzakh. Okay, so this is now from this point onwards, this is no longer in the physical world. Where in the grave he sees an opening, and he goes into that opening and he enters a world where he sees gardens and a beautiful castle, and the castle is made with bricks that are jewels and very, very, luxurious, beautiful. He goes through the gardens, past all these trees. He goes into the castle. In the castle, he sees somebody who is talking to other people. There's somebody at the head of like a table who's talking to others and updating them, telling them that, oh yeah, this person in the dunya got married, and this person, this happened to him, and this person, this happened to him. But every few moments, there is a snake that comes and bites the leg of this individual, and he goes through a lot of pain. The color of his face changes, and then slowly the pain goes away, and he continues talking. Okay, so Naraqi goes up to him and he asks him like, "Who are you? Where am I? What's going on? What is this castle? What is the snake?" And he explains. He says that I am that same individual that you just buried, the person that you were finishing the burial of. I was a pious person and in the dunya. I was somebody who prayed and worshipped and had taqwa. And so this is how Allah has rewarded me. This is all mine in the alam barzakh. This castle, these gardens, everything is what I have earned, basically. What's the snake? He said, as much as I think of it, there's only one thing that I did wrong in my life. And that was that once there was a store owner who was arguing with a customer over how much money the customer owed, and they had a difference of opinion. The store owner said, "You owe me 6 shahi." The currency was called shahi. "You owe me 6." And the customer was saying, "No, I just owe 5." And he said that I came in and by force I arbitrated. And I said that, okay, I told the store owner, just be happy with 5.5. And I told the customer, just pay 5.5. Be happy with paying half a shahi more. And he told the store owner, be happy with getting half a shahi less. He said that I did that and the store owner was not happy, but I somehow forced him to do it. And so, because of that one mistake that I made, till the day of judgment, God is punishing me like this, that this snake is coming and biting me on the leg. At that point, Naraqi tells him that, look, I have to go back home. My family's hungry. I'm going to take your leave. So he comes, the man in the Alam Barzakh, he escorts Naraqi out of his castle and he gives him a bag of rice. It's very interesting. And the guy, when Naraki comes out of the grave, out of the Alam Barzakh, back into the grave, back into the dunya, he has the rice with him. And he goes home, and for a long period of time, his family cooks that rice and it doesn't diminish. It's like a miracle. And it's the most beautiful, best tasting, best smelling rice that they've ever had. Until one day, one of the neighbors, one of the guests wanted to know where did this amazing rice come from? And Naraqi's wife told that individual that, okay, this is the story behind it. After that, then the rice diminished and it no longer miraculously remained. There's a lot of interesting points. I don't, I'm not going to go into all of them, but generally the idea is that there is this other world of barzakh where it's generally hidden for most people. It's alim al-ghaib, it's not accessible. But for very pious individuals like Naraqi in this story, he is able to enter that world and see these realities. So all of this is very much related to our discussions that we will kind of proceed into about the nafs. It's related to, like I said, imamat. The Ahlul Bayt have the highest position. All of these worlds, they've traveled to the end of all of these worlds. It's related to ma'ad, that our belief in return to God is that we are going to go back to these other worlds. So, somehow understanding this Islamic worldview is really important. Okay, we'll leave it at that for today. If anybody has any questions, comments, otherwise, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
Sheikh, a quick question. Are all these alam have already been created and are present in peril, or would they be
Yeah.
created after? Like, for example, the Day of Judgment, we know we'll pass into that, but it is already, does it already exist right as of now? For example, do we know from hadith and sources?
Yeah, definitely. That's what these Islamic scholars really, really try to emphasize. This story is an example. Verses of the Quran, in different ways, we can see this reality that it's already existing right now. In some verses of Quran, paradise and is described as u'iddat. It has been prepared. It's already been prepared. It's waiting for us. So the idea definitely is there that these things all exist. For most people, there is a kind of period of time where you will slowly exit one world and enter the next world. For some people who have this high position, they can somehow just go into that other world very quickly and easily. But yeah, it's all existing right now.
Okay, thanks. And the alam that you mentioned, akal or jabarut, so is that, you said some refer to it as the Day of Judgment, right? Correct?
I don't know about that. I don't think so. I think that division is more just this idea of does it have shapes and forms or is it completely immaterial? Aql is completely immaterial and shapes and forms is mithal. And then the dunya is the actual physical world. Okay? So maybe some scholars might say Qiyamat is alam aql, but I don't know if that's like a common opinion or yeah, I'm not sure about that. Maybe when we come to Ma'ad, I'll get a chance to read up more on that and I can let you know, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. Thanks.
Ahsant, yeah, Brother Akil, you're right. The word Jabarut does come in the Qunut of Eid Namaz. It's probably used in a different sense though, Brother Akil. That's probably just like the hadith terminology. Here, philosophers have taken these terms, even aql. Okay, aql over here, the way we're using it, is like a very specific philosophical terminology of a world where it's completely immaterial and there's no shapes and forms. So even Jabarut is probably some kind of philosophers have taken these terms and used them in a very specific way. Okay. Okay, brothers, sisters, thank you for your time. Yes, Brother Masud?
Sorry, Sheikh, I didn't mean to keep you over
No
time.
problem.
Just one last question. When you mentioned regarding ghaib and shahada as concepts that are relative, um, and I think you briefly mentioned regarding like gradational existence, Mullah Sadra's gradational existence. Is there a relationship there? Because whatever is concealed in witness by, for example, animals is fixed in existence, but for humans, it can change. So I just wonder if there's a relationship between the two, and could we understand it better through this understanding of gradational existence?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think you're right that if we understand the gradational existence, we would realize that generally the human, what is witnessable for most human beings stops at a certain level. And then the existence that is higher than that would all be ghaib, other than, very special individuals. Yeah? I don't know if does that, you have anything else you
Thank
want to ask?
you.
Oh, inshallah. Okay, take care, everybody. If you want to, we'll see you next week.